Okay, hi everyone. My name is Scott Peterman. I'm a technologist here, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am not your traditional technologist. I graduated with a military history degree from Yale University in 2002. Had a commission as a captain in the Air Force because I wanted to go to Mars. Bush won. I said, screw this shit, and I moved to New York to do musical theater. That's obviously worked out and is paying the bills. But I've always been drawn to technology. I've always been a hacker, did lots of electronics when I was a kid. And after moving to New York and finding the musical theater wasn't going to cut it, I moved to the new kind of storytelling industry, and I worked at Rockstar Games, making legitimate versions of Grand Theft Auto. For about 3.5 years, I was there from the tail end of Vice through San Andreas and the beginnings of the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 platform. I did a lot of different stuff. And then those days in the video game industry, everyone did some testing, but I also used this picture because I came up with the algorithm that makes CJ, the character, either fat or thin, depending on how you live, and how it determines how people respond to you. After that, I moved into this monstrosity and ran the Genius Bar there for about 4 years. More of a people manager than a technical person. Started off on the graveyard shift, but nothing teaches you about the failings of technology than having to deal with Upper East Side women and the entire population of Europe, and having your job to teach them how to use their technology and fix it when it's broken. And then I helped start this company called Bonobos as the VP of Marketing and Sales. The company still exists. Based actually quite near here, an online e-tailer for men's fashion. It was really based around analytics and metrics and understanding your customer and what they wanted and making very intelligent product recommendations. But 2 years ago, I said, you know what? I'm sick of this. I'm sick of managing people who know all about this stuff. I want to do it. And I got bit by the coding bug, and I went back to school at Parsons, in the MFA DT program, and I continued to study and work there. So something that's been in my work my whole life, and aspects of myself. So I've always been a performer, as you can tell. I'm very shy. I don't like speaking in front of groups or anything like that. And so this has always been my true art form, is performance. This is my play, Sailor Man. We were in the Fringe Festival a few years ago, ran off-Broadway for a couple of years, and still do it occasionally the Upright Citizens Brigade. I've also always been a teacher. I have done all sorts of teaching theater after school for the Departments of Parks and Recreation for a long time. This is a lab I work with, and I apologize, my slides are getting cut off a little, but this is the pet lab at Parsons, one of 2 labs that I kind of help run with Colleen Macklin. And we teach game design, but we really try and tailor the games to very different curriculums. So this was us in Abu Dhabi this summer, teaching kids to make games about social responsibility and the environment. The hope being that we're teaching them to make a game, and that reinforces the learnings of the subject we're talking about, much more than just having them either play a game or having them talk about that subject. This is kind of who I am now as a coder. I just got bit by the bug, and I almost work entirely in code. I don't even really think of myself as a designer anymore, because now I have a visual designer that I work with. I'm very platform agnostic. I really don't care as much. I work most in up-left Arduino because a lot of my stuff is physical, but I'm equally comfortable in open frameworks. I love code light things. That up on the right is a piece of software called Game Salad that is freaking great. You can get so far in some of these tools, and this is something that easily could be taught to a 9th grader. I think that's really nice when you're actually using the tools we're teaching. And I'm like, we're using Game Maker, but when I make games, I use the Unreal Engine. This is something where you can make, and this is a game I'm working on, commercial, game that I would want to actually sell called Pizza Camp. Or then, obviously, the traditional game making software. But the big thing about who I am as a person and how I describe myself is I think of myself kind of as a historian of the future. I think we operate in this context-free space where everything's new and everything's an adventure and it's all happening and we're the singularity, we're right on the wave. But we don't really talk about, well, what is the future historically? What have we thought of the future as being, and how are we going to instantiate that? I don't mean this. I don't mean magic 8 balls and futures trading and bones and scrying. I don't mean predicting what's going to happen to individuals, but I mean studying this history of how we as a culture have envisioned the future. So studying, and this is where I've been since I was a little kid, science fiction. Studying speculative fiction, and how that's painted a picture of the future. It's particularly interesting now as all of these, from Jules Verne's time up through present day, we're like hitting the time when the future happens. All these things are set like 2000 and 2035. So we're now in the future, and I think it's useful to study it. I have kind of expanded this outwards through my own practice to both studying designs, real-world designs, and things that actually exist in the real world that attempt to instantiate that future. And then really in studying art history as instantiations of the future. The ones on the lower right, lower line are kind of some net artwork. I do a lot of work in preserving this. I work at Rhizome at the New Museum, and we do a lot of work trying to get these people dealing with the beginning of the future in the 90s as the internet came about, and this stuff has become obsolete. So I think it's really important to study that. However, so that kind of, I think we've all noticed, and we can all see that there's kind of been a disintegration of things as we move into the future. That media has gone from something very solid and very present to the cloud, to something that doesn't even exist as bits in your pocket, in this anymore. It's who the heck knows. Then film, and I think books are particularly striking as books were objects, books were objects, books were objects, and 2 years later, I was like the biggest book fan. I would never think of reading a book anymore. Someone got me a Kindle, it was done, like in a day. I got rid of all my books, I sold them all. And so I think that's a striking example. And I think that, while that can be scary, there's something really powerful here, is that when this does connect to a wider world, there is some degree of physics breaking down, the limits of time and space falling apart when we have all of human knowledge here. I find that to be pretty hopeful, but I also find it to be very frustrating that we've got a magical and revolutionary new device with a shitty QWERTY keyboard on it. It was something that was invented to make secretaries type slower because they were breaking typing machines. Why? This is what we get? This is the future? I don't know. So a lot of my own work has been trying to get around that. Started with trying to use this for something more interesting. This is an experiment I've been doing for about 3 years. It's a very simple iPhone game that you roll out to a group of friends, and they input challenges to each other. Turning an elevator, do an elevator roller coaster ride. Right? When we go down the elevator, we all have to ride screaming with our hands in the air, and then we give each other's points for doing it, for having a dance party at Grand Central, things like that. This is another work I did to try and get out of the keyboard modularity. This is, I hate to say augmented reality, because I think that's kind of a lame term, but it is what it is. And what we do, this is called Next World, is we map art to real-world locations. So, for instance, I could come to iBeam and put up a big picture on the front of iBeam. The thing is, I have to be at iBeam to put it up. I have to be at iBeam to look at it. And there can't be 2 artworks on the front of iBeam. Only one in one place. So that was kind of about taking these contextless devices, these flat surfaces, and bringing them into the real world and using them in the real world. But it's still this. It still keeps us in here looking through this little window. It doesn't engage us in the way that the real world does. And so I thought of a corollary problem, and one that's maybe been around even longer, is that with music, which is so gestural, we've really been reducing over the last 150 years music to this same boring typing. Yes, it's on a 12-tone keyboard and not a typing QWERTY keyboard, but to me it's a very specific case study, an example where we can look at how this stuff can start to break down. We can come to something more interesting. So this is my own work here. This is my primary work. It's called the Invisible Marching Band. It's a series of open source instruments, and I'll just put on a little video so you can kind of see me playing. But they're all made for under $60. They're all open source, and they let you play trumpet. We've got trombone, tuba, drums, and cymbals, all entirely on your body. So there's no screen, there's no interface or anything like that. In between you, kind of mediating in between you and the devices, there's me playing all of them. But they let you create real music and make real art and teach real lessons of music. This is my project. We got funded on Kickstarter this summer on a couple of TV shows coming up, and so there's been a lot of kind of response to this. So very, very quickly going to phrase just my 3 questions, so we'll just take a minute, 3 things that I'm really interested in exploring. The first of which is just getting this group of educators together and discussing control surfaces. And that's something we don't talk about, is how the act of inputting and getting the information really fundamentally changes how you deal with that information. So hopefully I can help us open up that physical side of things beyond just iPads, websites, and blogs. Another 2 is just an obsession with materiality and with getting away from even Arduino and talking about ways we can teach kids valuable lessons and teach ourselves valuable lessons with me. I've learned to weaving conducting circuits. This is a paint I have. Lets me paint circuits entirely on my body, or with things like thermochromic ink that have this reactivism and have this kind of binary on-off of programmatic logic, but don't actually involve power. And then the final as future's gone on, visuals have gotten more and more high resolution. Audio has gotten more and more low resolution, right? We've become much more accustomed to really low quality audio. And I'm very interested in this. What's the resolution of this as an input? What's the resolution of this taking output and touch? And how we can start to move beyond being trapped in this little box or this little box to a haptic, the way we really relate with the real world, which is extremely spatially and extremely haptic. And how we can start to bring that into the technological experience. Thank you.
I wish we had the imaginary marching band right now.
Yeah, well, if any of you guys want to perform it, I've got a job for you. I will not be paying you, but Miguel, how are you here?
Hey everyone, my name is Irene, and I have up here a phonetic pronunciation of my name, because inevitably that will be the burning question you'll be wanting to ask me. Irene, and if it comes down to it, and which often happens in crunch time, you can just call me I. My teammates always just like forget the last name and say, hey I. So I'm going to talk about a few of my interests that I think are relevant to education. My background, I was a European history major with a minor in philosophy. Then really got into James Joyce, like, I don't know if any of you are Joyce fanatics, but I studied with his teacher at Columbia, which got me into Chinese calligraphy. So as far as design goes and my interest in technology, it's very informed both by narratives as well as by our physical body. I'm so happy to hear what you guys described. It's really exciting to me. And so I spent 4 years basically training with the Zen calligraphy teacher. And my main interest, I would say, when it comes to technology is physical interaction. I think when we talk about education, we talk about the way we learn. Some things I'm interested in is mimetics, how children just learn from mimicking. So what happens when they're always looking at a digital screen or a computer? What are they really feeling with their body presence, with their space around them? And how can we create these portals or these mirrors to themselves that allow them to be in their bodies, to have presence, and to be connected not just with this amazing, magical virtual world, I think virtual is a great term for it, but a non-physical world, to also their physical realities. On that note, community is something that is always in the back of my mind when I think about technologies. Are we really more connected, even with Facebook and Twitter? Like, how are you and I connected here in this room? How can we balance out these connections online to the community around us? And how can we take a look at knowledge systems as communities versus the communities that we actually exist in the classroom and related to in the way that's actually helpful. And then narrative structures, how can we use narrative to sort of explore our context today? I think that in some ways I grew up with books, and that helped me, gave me challenges and stories to reflect on how I deal with problems like going back and forth to different countries, being like a lot of mythologies and stuff, and how can we bring that to technology and the world that we live in with the computer. So the projects that I worked on that I think might be of interest to you guys, one is called Wheatgrass. It combined Twitter and Wheatgrass. It was a physical interface where the goal was to promote sort of a community-oriented challenge to help our environment. So whenever you did something to help the environment in some ways, you could Twitter the screen to a hashtag, and your name with what you did would appear as a cloud. And as clouds accumulated, it would reach this point where it would rain. It would actually trigger a watering system onto the wheatgrass below it, which people could then use as a measuring stick for how much we were actually helping the environment. And if you didn't have Twitter, because Twitter is something I didn't use at all, you could just recycle underneath in the bins, and that actually also had a sensor that we shop the word, it will open up a new connection of networks and other words. And we also used it for different things too. That's the great thing I find with the virtual programming world, which is that I use this for poetry, for educational stuff. So you have an interface that can be used in different ways, and kids love this one. Another one was My Cloud, which is a pillow controller. The objective, we saw this to be in hospitals or in hectic office spaces where you just want a space to relax and lie down. And you could hold this cloud pillow controller, and it would actually shape the clouds above you in a projection screen. And the goal was to have a few people lay down and basically build castles in the air together and just relax and breathe. So right now I'm working on a project that directs light down into air shaft spaces. I've lived in apartments in New York where it's, oh sorry, you can't see the picture there, where it's purely dark. It's always like 6 o'clock in the evening. You don't get any sunlight. You go out and you're like, oh my God, it's actually sunny. So how can we actually promote conversion of air shaft spaces, maybe eventually like with things like window farms and vertical gardening, to think of it as a space that you can actually change. And another thing that I've been working on that was inspired by a children's story that I'm writing is to combine a physical interface with the iPhone, iPad, where you have pages that turn, that you slip an iPad into or iPhone into, that actually turns an animation and images behind. So using translucent materials and stenciling and different art to actually interact with the digital interface behind it and have it inform each other in narrative context as well. So lastly, I've raised a series of questions already, but I just wanted to bring the story that I just learned about. 2 weeks ago, I was talking to a teacher, and she was saying that she started to bring this object. This is a 3,000-year-old piece of technology in her classroom, and sounds like that. And she starts and closes her class with ritual playing of this, and she works with autistic kids. And she said there was this one boy who was very behind the class. He couldn't speak in class, but when he would do this, he could have a normal conversation with people. Now, I'm not saying that our technologies need to be able to do this, but it is a question of really what is the magic? It doesn't have to be the virtual world. It can be something like this where it's hammered out and it has these qualities of allowing to be present in here. So thank you.
I recently graduated from Varsity in the Design Technology program as an undergraduate. Since then, I've been trying to get a job. I spent a lot of time thinking about the internet. I really like it. And that's where most of my work really revolves around this. So I got a job working at RDA right now, programming iPhone apps, and I'm very satisfied with this idea of the iPhone. I mean, it's a great piece of technology, but I guess the way that we're using it, I think things could be better. So a lot of my work is really, it delves into nerdy fields like combining interfaces, robotics, mobile applications, game design, and I'll get into conceptual software in one of my last projects. But really, I think that new technologies aren't necessarily better technologies, and I think if we kind of rework existing technologies and just add on things that we already have, especially just really basic, dead simple technologies, we can actually find out things about the gaps that exist, especially in terms of how we relate to technology and how we relate to each other. Most of my work has been really about remixing the present as a tool for thinking about the future. So just taking things that exist around us that we use And so he actually breathes. And you can feel the contractions and expansions in his chest, and he breathes out of his mouth. So you basically wrap him around your arms, and he hugs you, and then he breathes, and he's basically sleeping. And the idea of this was really questioning the fact that we always, we're constantly giving technologies to the youth, and we're just leaving them alone with them and trying to get them to learn, and that really detracts from the fact that there was a person there previously that assisted these children. However, I get a lot of feedback from parents about their children, a lot of people who work with disabled children, and they love this, and they thought it would be a great piece of technology. So it actually caused me to delve further into the matter. I've still been kind of positing what is a good sort of interface that would kind of facilitate relaxation in a child, but would not really detract from the fact that they're interacting with another human being. Susie's ghetto, so his belly is actually a latex glove. It used to be a contraceptive that broke. There's a motor that basically pumps air into him. There's a valve in his mouth. There's an Arduino. So it's a very basic way of building this really complex interaction. That's what I'm really interested in, is using very simple components to really evoke something in people. So moving on, I've really gotten interested in using humor technology to sort of critique the ways that we use technology. And one example of this is this project called Augmented Reality Cake, where I'm really finding that uses of augmented reality are cropping up everywhere to kind of make substandard products look amazing, and I don't really think that's working. So I decided to see if it would, assist my baking skills, which are horrible to suck. And so I decided to make a cake, frost a fiducial marker on top, and write a computer application that would put Keanu Reeves on a unicorn, and see if I could make this amazing cake for a friend using computer vision, cake, fiducial marker, augmented reality. And the cake tasted awful, but it looked really beautiful. And so I'm kind of interested in sort of augmenting things that we wouldn't think about and using these technologies in ways that aren't just commercial, they aren't in an expected way, but kind of branching out in terms of how we use them. And especially tying in very material elements that serve as markers. Most of my recent research has been about emerging communities. The first of which is, it has to do with Twitter. You won't be able to see this at all, unfortunately. But basically, this project is called We Read, We Tweet. And what I did is I don't understand Twitter, or at least I didn't 2 years ago. And it was my entry into understanding Twitter. It's like, actually, it's really difficult. But I got understanding of it. Basically, this project is, it tracks the dissemination of New York Times articles through Twitter. So basically, when somebody tweets from Germany about an incident that happened in Chicago, it would basically track the to and from points and see where these are happening. And basically the project is displayed in a video format, but I have it. I think it would take a little too long to show that. But these are screenshots from the actual visualization, which is in 3D space. There's a geospatial map at the very bottom. And these lines that you see are lines that happen from places around the world, and they're going to where the contextual location of the article is, and having these arcs. And it happens over time, so you sort of see them flying into this location, which the article is about. And it was really interesting to see when, during the day, certain tweets happened and where they were from. So there was a terrorist attempt in, I believe it was in Chicago at one point, and the first tweet was in London, the second tweet was in Buenos Aires, and then people in the United States started to sort of pick up on it and tweet. And it was really fascinating to really see the dissemination, specifically in terms of where people are and when they start to tweet about things that happen in the news. More street graphs. And then the final project I'm going to show you is it was my thesis project at school. It's called Dumpster Drive. I've almost gotten in a lot of trouble with this project. It looks harmless. But basically, Dumpster Drive is a Mac OS application. It looks kind of like this. And basically, it serves as a file sharing network for your digital trash. So let's say you have a bunch of Justin Bieber and you just don't like him anymore, and you want to get rid of those albums. Well, if you had a CD, you could throw it outside in the street, and it'd be fine, somebody could pick it up. And there are legality issues there, but looking online, we usually share what we think other people want. We don't really share in a passive way what we don't. The things that we don't want, we basically just throw away. So this was a way of actually passively sharing our trash on our computer. And it takes the model of dumpster diving and really applies it to our digital desktops. So the way it works is basically you have a file, you delete it to the application, it's uploaded to a centralized server, and anyone who's connected to the centralized server can download your file onto their computer. And when they do, it gets deleted from that centralized server. So it's really this object-to-object transition. And the reason I really chose to do that is because I wanted to embed materiality into objects. I really wanted to make them seem a bit more material, because this is the concept I've been thinking about a lot. It's like, how can we make data a bit more material? Because I'm really concerned with the fact that we don't really associate containers with your digital objects anymore. Like a PDF is just a PDF. You don't really associate it with a book. And in future generations, I think this will happen. It'll be exacerbated even more. Where they'll be like, what is a book? I just use PDFs. So I'm kind of concerned about that. This project was partially addressing it. You can download it and feel free to give me or anyone else your trash. So go to dumpsterguy.com. But yeah, it was pretty amazing. There were like 50,000 files deleted. That's a typo, 20,000 downloads, about 40 gigabytes of content that people didn't want. And they shared it through this application, and it was repurposed. And so it was also a way of exploring the meaning of data, how much data means to us in our lives, and what it means to sort of lose data as opposed to having your house burned down. So our sensitivity to the data on our computer. So the questions I have are pretty broad. The first one is more has to do with like my personal work, but how to engage others in critical discourse about technologies that we interact with in the everyday. And I think that we sort of interact with technologies like Facebook and Twitter. We don't really think about them necessarily in the depth that I would like to. And I try to create projects that provoke some sort of discourse and have people talking. And they just raise open questions. And I'm really interested in sort of applying that to classrooms as well. So getting people started at an early age about what happens if I sign up for Facebook, what am I giving away? Another one is how does the digitization, so like those physical objects that we have, really affect our relationships in new and old media, and each other. And this also has to do with an educational question. Really, does materiality affect the way that we learn? Is the fact that we're sort of moving towards digitization in classrooms kind of affecting how students learn, especially with learning disorders? I had a really hard time moving over to e-readers because I have a learning disorder and I just love books. So it's kind of concerning to me if this is going to be a shift, and I want to see, are there other possibilities for students, or can we add some sort of tactility to the way that we're learning while still adding technology to it? And finally, how to foster creative approaches towards technology in schools. And really focusing on technology as a creative medium, not as a facilitator of getting a job to get out or writing a paper. We're really focusing on how we can learn more from computers and how I think it was discussed before, but algorithmic thinking can be applied to many different topics. It's been definitely useful for me. And I want to see if there are ways that I can sort of apply this to other fields as well. So thank you.
Cool.
So running a little behind, so you guys are saying very interesting things, so I'm going to keep on my terms.
Am I the only one that after the presentation I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel the energy after every presentation. I was thinking of doing a slow clap.
So hi everybody, I'm Luke Rundle. I love screens, just sort of differentiate myself. I'm going to say this, I was a teacher here, but I think I'm a librarian, so I'm not sure. So just quickly about some stuff I've worked on in the past. This is a project called Open Scribble. It basically allows anybody to go online and build a map. It was created for an organization called Random Acts of Kindness. They're a group that gets together and they create projects within 24 hours. They try to create projects for basically nonprofits. This is a mapping service I created, sort of like Google Docs. You can go in, you can create a map in real time with anybody around the world. And also another project I worked on was Radon. It's an interactive point-and-click adventure game. It was created for Lauren Redness. She's a really great author, and she wrote this book about Madame Curie, about her life. And that's actually where all the art assets are from. So I didn't actually all this art here I didn't create. I sort of ripped it from her book and make this game. And the idea is that in this game you can go around and explore the life of Madame Curie through a point-and-click adventure game. And a lot of text from her book is in the game, and a lot of graphics are from her book. So just a little bit more, I've made all kinds of mobile applications. This is for really old school Nokia stuff, even physical hardware prototyping I've done. And also right now I work for Big Spaceship, which is a creative agency in Dumbo. And I sort of mostly do web apps, sort of my bread and butter there. And if you want to see more, or you want to play that game, you can visit this URL. So basically, the idea I want to explore is gamification, and I was sort of worried about using this term because it's sort of become a little bit of a buzz marketing type thing. And also just because when I say the word gamification, the first thing that comes to everyone's mind is badges, or even worse, achievements. So I sort of was a little worried about using that word, but I really want to kind of talk about how I think gamification can be applied to education. It's a little more specific than just the general term of gamification. So right now, I guess you see the main problem with education right now is a demotivational model. The idea is that you start off really great, everyone has an A at the start, and then over time you start to fail. And just to give credit where credit's due, there's this really great web series called Extra Credits. They have a really great video about gamifying education. It's a 10-minute long video. I really suggest that anyone's interested in doing anything with games and education, you watch this video. It's about 10 minutes long. And a lot of the ideas I stole from this video, so I really recommend that you watch it. Right down. So sort of the idea is like, how can you lose at World of Warcraft? If anyone doesn't know what World of Warcraft is, it's a game, it's a massive multiplayer RPG. And the question is, how can you lose? Well, the answer is you really can't lose. And I think that's a really great metaphor for education. Right? We don't want people to think, how can I get the A, or how can I win in this case, but how do we get them to be in love with education itself, almost like a game. So like I said before, everyone starts with 100, and then they go down, and they slowly over time they lose. This is very demotivational, whereas in games, they go the opposite track. Everyone starts with 0 and goes up to 100. And this is a really great metaphor. So it's sort of like almost like experience points in games. Students can gain experience points in their lives and in their education, where they can slowly progress through each level and go up instead of down. That is a great motivational force. And what's really great about using, I call them experience points for lack of a better word, is because you can sort of link this to other activities you want them to do. So say, instead of each student is alone and they're each earning their own grades, say if everyone can get to level 1 in the class, then everyone gets another 20 bonus points. So it's more of a way of distributing points in a way which creates clear, tangible goals through levels. And actually, Lee Sheldon is a game professor, and he actually employed a lot of these methods, and this is sort of the curriculum he came up with, where students would slowly start at 0 and go upwards in points, and he was very successful, and I definitely think you should check out his work. And also, more recently, Khan Academy, probably a lot of you are familiar with it. It's the same exact model of everyone starts knowing nothing and starting off with 0 points and then goes back up and learning more and more skills over time. And they also have badges and achievements and that kind of thing. So thank you.
That feels so much better, right?
We need the motivational model.
It's a ritual. It's the ritual.
Should we go back in time for the first?
Yeah, we could do an extra round.
Hi, I'm Dave Jimison, and I the late 90s, I've been really intensely involved with technology, both professionally, doing web, streaming, mobile, sort of whatever the latest thing is, and then as what's become termed as a tech artist. During that time, I think that what's relevant here is I've become really adept at working with people on problems and thinking about where technology is appropriate and really thinking about what technology should be and where it's a good match. Also related is I'm ABD in a dissertation on mobile technologies and comparing that with avant-garde, the trajectory from the Romantics up through punk, of people that are in the sort of fringes of our culture and critiquing that culture, to what I term now as a pervasive network society, where we are constantly engaged in network technologies and how that's transforming our everyday life. So a lot of the work that I do is sort of very technology-driven, derived, but also very interested in disruption and play. A project I did back in 2005, I think is relevant, was commissioned by the City of Atlanta for Freedom Park. It's a 5-mile stretch of park, and I coded a Java-based voice over IP, hacked a cell phone to register the dial tones, and turned it and put up signs, 24 signs around the park. It's really low tech. I printed them out at Kinko's on vinyl and sort of bound them to trees and things, asking them to call up the number and just use a dial tone system to record stories and leave stories at different locations. It was really a nice experience for me because I didn't know what to expect, and it was a very emergent phenomenon where people were talking about stories and relating to them, and the history of those spaces really started to grow with these sort of communities of people that have lived in that area and never connected, were connecting over these really sort of cheap signs. One thing that I learned was that Freedom Park itself had started with a protest. It was supposed to be a highway that was going through Atlanta, and people camped out in the 80s and said, no, you can't do that. And so a lot of these sort of just trees or little spots were places that people had a lot of emotional value to. And that's had an effect on my work. So I'm thinking about allowing sort of audiences to emerge. Also, since we're so related here to like groups, I think I have a couple of different things from my work I think are relevant. On the bottom here is Wiggle Stick. This is sort of one of my thesis projects at Georgia Tech as a dissertation. Wiggle Stick is, by its name you can tell it's a bit fun, but it's a navigation system that attempts to be mostly, although the screen isn't showing, it's mostly used by vibration. So maybe everyone's played hot and cold as a kid, where so it's essentially using the vibration sensor to just provide hot and cold. Essentially, you put your phone back in your pocket and just walk and enjoy the city and get vibration signals to know where you should go back and forth. The interface you see is simply to provide visual information to select. Above Urban Bingo, this is a completely paper-based game, except for the software I wrote to generate the algorithms. I was surprised this was successful. I did it for a really nice festival called Come Out and Play on a whim. And essentially, it's bingo with the aspects of the bingo being the city. So cop on a bike, graffiti. And it was very situationist, international inspired, so if you're familiar with that art group, it's very much about engaging with the city. What's fun about it is, again, it asks people to have conversations about objects in the city and how they relate. And it's been published in a few books, it's been played in games festivals around the world. And again, it's one of those things that just allows people to play with something and there's an emergent quality. Finally, in the corner is iHeartArt. This is a mobile application I did in 2007 with a web component. It's not defunct, but essentially it allowed people to tag graffiti and find around the city. Two Smart City, I was a fellow and a resident at IBM. This is kind of my home more than any apartment in New York City. IBM, if you don't know it, is a wonderful art and technology center that really takes, one of the things I think that's great here is that it takes new artists and provides an atelier model, allowing new artists to sort of develop themselves and to sort of explore themselves here. So that's what I did here. And while I was here, I received a commission from the Architecture League. The Architecture League had a show called The Sentient City, or Towards the Sentient City, and they commissioned 5 different pieces to relate to that conversation. The Sentient City is thinking about, for asking architects to think about where the city is going to, where there's embedded technology. when the city has memory, when the city has some kind of intellectual knowledge to it. Me being a bit subversive, I built Too Smart City. And I was thinking about public furniture that is too smart for its own good. So the sort of core idea behind it is that people often only notice problems in their city when they break down. So I wanted to move that conversation of problems in the sentient city to the sort of experience. So if you look here, the sign would move around and follow you. I had IR sensors, so it would move and follow you, point at you, and tell you different rules that you were breaking. It's too bad it's so dim here, but the trash can would only accept aluminum cans. Anything else, it would spit back out to you. And the bench would allow you to sit there for 2 minutes, after which it would raise up and dump you off. Okay, so I'm moving fast because I want to keep it to 5 minutes. But the questions I have are mobile tech, sort of classically, we've been trained as like a downtime thing. You play Angry Birds on the subway. You read a book for 3 minutes. And for me, this is interesting because I have ADD, and I almost failed high school. And really the way that I actually started succeeding was someone said, hey, I basically learned to teach myself, to spend time on my own, and to sort of develop my own learning models. And I don't really know if this is appropriate because I don't know too much about education. But for me, I think it's fascinating that this can be sort of like at least supplementary, where people are able to learn when they want to in different smaller components. So that's something I'm interested in. Second, what are the future of pen pals? Okay, this is something that's weird maybe, but I went to grade school in the 80s, and we had pen pals in Belgium. And I don't know if that exists anymore because social networks is always about weak connections. I have lots of people that are in Belgium and different places, but I don't really know them. So one of the things I'm interested in is how can technology facilitate deeper connections with people? My mom is an ESL teacher in Northern Virginia, and so she has an amazing problem where she basically, at a public school, gets dumped all these people from different life experiences, from Latin America to refugee camps and everything, and she has to bring them together and find core relationships to bring them together. And I think that is something I would love to see happen more, facilitate more, is sort of deep connections with people around the world in education. And finally, this is something I'm really interested in learning here is, and I kind of brought it up in my question, is how technology is changing the way that we work and we think. So, like, I'm very aware that my basic job is to sort of work with people and find the problems that they have, and to gain an understanding of that. And only then can I apply my knowledge set. And I'm very, very aware that the experiences I had in K through 12 are completely different than what I imagined coming into here. And now hearing what you guys actually do, I'm blown away. So one of the main things I want to learn, and the questions I have, is what's going on, right? And like, what do people use Twitter for? What do they use the networks for? When they get something like Alice, like, what are they actually doing? What kinds of animations are relevant for them? And is it a social thing, or is it singular? So those are the things that I'm really fascinated about. Thanks.
I'm just curious, how many people had pen pals? Great.
It was the actual question.
Yeah. A nation of writers. Actually, it was in a group of women. Remember this, but remember came out for K-1990.
No way.
Jimmy Carter expressed
Hey, so I'm Maria, and I think I'm going to start with a little entertainment from the site that is my company's website. So this is broadcasting. It's actually a lot like what David, what you had done with people calling in and recording their stories. This is actually the same idea where people can record their stories either on the web or using their mobile phones, and then those stories are pinned to locations around the world. And then, people, as they go through the world, either with their phones or, browsing on the map, can learn about that place from the people at that place. There's also professionally curated content out there. But, so let me just play back a little short, I actually don't have time for that, do I? 2 minutes out of 5. Okay. Well, so just trust me, these are funny stories. Let me just play back a few seconds. Oh, wait, this is my wife. It's too quiet now. Okay, I'll restart it. All right, well, forget it. So, this is where I'm working now, and anticlimactic, sorry. So basically, you know, we started.
Curiosity is.
Just opened up, and it was kind of, Dumont was starting to make Union Ave a hip little part of Williamsburg. You know, you kind of got to go under the BQE to get hip. You got to be down Bedford Street, and this was like a real industrial section with like the Kellogg Diner and the lumber yard and stuff. But there was Dumont, and so we thought we were kind of like, you know, on the frontier of the new hip Williamsburg. I don't have any good stories from that apartment, but my wife does, and she's going to be mad at me telling this one. But she lived in that apartment before we got married, and I always loved this story. She was, you know, she's a waitress, and she, you know, she'd be out drinking after her shift. Let's be honest, she had a couple of cocktails, you know. And she was riding home with a $20 bill in her pocket. That's all she had. She had spent all her money at the bar. I mean, she wasn't that drunk. My wife doesn't drink much. I'm already in trouble for this story. But she's riding home in the cab, and she's got 20, and she's watching the meter, and it's starting to approach 20. And it's that thing where you're like, am I going to have to get out of this cab, you know, or am I just going to give the guy the 20? So she's thinking, she's holding that 20 in her hand, and she's thinking, I am not going to get out of this cab early. I'm going to take this cab to my apartment, and I'm going to give him the 20 and tell him it's all I have. So she decided not to bring it up with the cab driver because she thought he'd order her out of the cab. So she stayed in the cab all the way, and the fare was like $21.50, just a little bit over $20, just barely went over. And so she's getting worked up and getting ready to just hand him the 20, get out, and get in her apartment and slam the door and be like, that's all I have, there's nothing I can do, and just give him the 20, he's going to have to be happy with it. So she's working it up in the cab the whole ride there, all right? The last thing she remembers is her standing on her walkway in front of her apartment, saying, it's all I have. She's yelling at him, and he's like, you crazy woman, you're crazy. And she's like, it's all I have. She's screaming at him, it's all I have, it's all I have. And he's like, you're crazy. And he keeps saying, you're crazy. And she goes in and slams the door, and she's like, it's all I have. She's screaming behind the door, you know. Next morning, she wakes up in bed. She's still clutching the $20 bill. That's all I have. Oh, you're crazy.
So anyway, this broadcast. Yeah, maybe I should close with this. It's kind of a hard act to follow, especially as a professional comedian. So we've got a bunch of professional content on there, and actually we're discovering that the best experience people have on the service is getting professionally curated content. So we're forming a bunch of partnerships. But the backstory is how I came to be involved with this project. I'm the lofty title of Director of Development at the startup. I'm the first technical employee. My background is both technological and sort of artsy, literary, I guess. I did a BS and MS in computer science at Stanford, and I also did a creative writing minor. And after working in tech in the Silicon Valley for a couple of years, I actually moved out to New York and wrote fiction for several years, which, like musical theater, does not pay the bills, or at least not very quickly. But I got involved with these guys who had a magazine called Electric Literature, and their whole thing was they kind of. This was like 2008, 2009, when the publishing industry was kind of in this like identity crisis. They were afraid of technology. They were thinking technology was going to kill off the book, and nobody knew what was going to happen. And these guys, they went to the Brooklyn College MFA, and they were saying, hey, I think technology can actually play nice nice with literature and can help a new generation of readers discover great writing. So they started this magazine, which probably it's a quarterly, more or less. They don't always put out their issues on time, but they try to publish their stories. So it's 5 stories per issue. Publish the stories to all these different digital outlets. So when the Kindle came out, Kindle, various e-readers, and of course when the iPhone came out, they wanted to be on the iPhone. And by that time, I've been working on another technology/narrative project called Story. And so Story, this is our iPhone app, which I created. This is my first iPhone project, so it's a little, not terribly exciting. But the basic idea is that we had original stories that would help people learn vocabulary. So there's a smart tracking system for keeping track of how well you know the words. The words, are highlighted in the text. You click on them, you can interact with them, and so it's the idea of contextual vocabulary learning. So this was my kind of entry point into iPhone development, and I met up with the electrical literature guys, and they needed to build out their iPhone and iPad publishing platform, so I did that with them, and actually ended up building a bunch of other apps as well. Let's see. This is the electric literature app that we have out, and then we actually built the Human Rights Watch app for them last year, and also some other apps like the Adderall Diaries for Stephen Elliott and some of the literary journals and so forth. So my interests and my experiences have largely been this merging of technology and narrative. In this whole time I've been writing fiction as well. So I have several short stories published and others kind of in the process of being published, and a novel that hasn't been published and is probably never going to be published. But as I was writing, writing is a very, very good way of learning how to think. And what I was beginning to understand was that the goal of the writer a lot of the time is, or any artist, is to communicate emotion and thought. And basically, the purpose of art to some extent is to bring people together through empathy. So you begin to understand other people better. And there's a lot of psychology involved in understanding how people perceive what you're creating and understanding what you yourself are perceiving. Ultimately, it's about what everything kind of is about, in making the world a happier, better place. And so as I was doing all these things and thinking about them, I was faced with this question of whether art by itself, for me, was the best way to improve the world, make an impact. And the same thing about technology. And what I kind of kept coming back to was that this goal of increasing people's empathy and their self-awareness, because the two I feel are very closely tied together, it's an educating process. And so I kind of kept being pushed back to the ideas of education, to the fact that these goals of making people understand themselves and others better are goals that should really be present in education and should be addressed in an educational context. So I actually read recently John Locke's Some Thoughts on Concerning Education, which was kind of encouraging because his two main points are basically let's not worry too much about teaching kids how to be great Latin speakers. This is broadcast rap, sorry. And let's not worry too much about them being great mathematicians. Let's give them the tools to pursue those things on their own time. But as educators, our main goal should be teaching them how to pursue a particular discipline if they become interested in it, and teaching them how to be good citizens, basically. So basically, my interest at this point, and I'll get to backlight in a second, my interest at this point is how can technology this is something that I think David spoke to as well, and some other speakers before. In technology, so much of the time is about convenience. It's about how can we make this a little bit quicker, how can we make this a little bit nicer, how can we connect each other a little bit, with higher video quality. My concern, I'm not interested in technology for technology's sake. I'm not really at heart a technologist. I'm at heart a humanist. I think we always have to keep in mind the main goal, right? The main goal is human happiness, right? Really, we're trying to better mankind. So the question for me about technology is how can, I think as you did were saying, how can we really make people understand themselves better, and by extension understand others better, and improve the relationships between people. So technology, not for itself, but really for improving humanity. And the recognition that I've arrived at is that one of the best ways to possibly do that is to use art in combination with technology. So, and that kind of brings me to my questions. How can we effectively use art, use technology as a delivery mechanism? It's an incredible delivery mechanism, right? It connects us. It's very fast. It's communal, social. How can we use those tools to deliver and use, specifically, I think, narrative art forms, because narrative art forms are incredibly good at getting people to empathize with others. You become a character when you read a story. How can you use those technologies to teach people about themselves, specifically young people, in order to make them effective thinkers and good citizens, as they go out into the world? And what steps can we take to do that? What technologies are out there that can facilitate that? And how can this happen? How can this become a more central part of our education system? Backlight is a project that a business partner of mine has worked on, and it's all about sort of the inspiration behind art. I bring it up because it was worked on by somebody I'm working with now. I actually wasn't very directly involved in this, but I am involved in a new project with this guy who founded this. And this project is about the interests of mine that I've mentioned, empathy and kind of getting people to make a positive impact on the world. The project is called One Beautiful Thing, and it's basically kind of like Photovine, if you guys know Photovine. It's a theme-based photo sharing. So you get a prompt, a theme prompt, and based on that prompt, you contribute a photo. And that's basically what Photovine is. But our idea is kind of to take that and take it one step further. You would actually, every action you take within the system, contributing a photo or viewing photos, would actually give you points, and those points would unlock funds that sponsors put in to support a cause or an organization. So, we feel like taking pictures of the world makes you more mindful of your surroundings, which is always good. And then you also have a direct positive impact on the world around you. So.
Sharing, we are actually very much behind schedule, but I thought this was really important because we really wanted all lab team members to understand all the things that the teachers are doing and are thinking about, and similarly on this side. And as you can see, Ralph and I have been trying to pull out some themes, but I think we are hearing some themes about materiality, about input, about narratives, and questions about space and context, etc. But I'm going to kind of jump, and I also see people are a little bit tired, and actually the concepting period is hopefully where we're going to get a little bit hands-on, but the concepting time is now actually very compressed. So we're going to just quickly jump into, so the format now is, we have two guests who've been very patient, and I know Alex may have to actually run somewhere. I don't know if your time's okay.